too. So.
Good morning, everyone. Is everybody doing all right today? Okay. How many leaders do we have in the room? Raise your hand if you're a leader. Okay, everybody should be raising their hand. Everybody in the room is a leader, right? Thank you, Chad. Appreciate that. Yeah, everybody's a leader. You're leading in some form or fashion. And I know we've talked about that many a time in the huddle because we're all leaders. I am not your surprise guest speaker today. I know you're disappointed. Yeah. So there were 3 attendees that went to the Great Game Conference. Rachel's here, and Angie's here, and I'm here. And one of the main stage speakers was Jeff Fultz. And he is retired military, and he now speaks on leadership.
I'd like to introduce to you, if you would please give us a super warm welcome for Jeff Fultz.
Good morning. It was a great introduction, Steve, but I was kind of hoping for the rock star entrance where that guy yells your name out. That's, there you go. That's pretty good. So a lot of you all probably wondering why there's an old retired Marine colonel up here talking to you at the Great Game of Business. Well, I'm going to kind of go through my story and some of the things that I did during my career, both in the Marine Corps and at SRC Lexington, which I joined 5.5 years ago. We talk about Great Game, right? And one of the things in the Great Game, it requires the right leadership approach. What is that? There's a lot of different ways to approach leadership. There's a lot of different training programs out there. There are many different ways that you can teach somebody to be a leader. Some of it's intuitive. Some people are just good leaders naturally. But what I'm going to talk about is one way. That's the Marine Corps way that I spent 30 years of my life practicing and executing. So a little bit about my story. 1986, between my junior and senior years at University of Kentucky, I was a political science major with a below average GPA. I was still dating my high school sweetheart, and my brother was an electrician. He couldn't find a job. Back in those days, it was hard to find a job in that field. So he joined the Marine Corps. No Marine Corps experience in our family, no military in our family. So we're driving through the gates at Parris Island to go watch him graduate. I'm sitting in the back seat with my wife, Sherry, or girlfriend at the time, and I see the Marines at the gate and the way they conducted themselves and how professional they were and how confident they were. We drove through the depot all the way to the end where we were going to go meet my brother, and I'm watching all these Marines. And I'm like, man, I kind of like to be like that. So I turned to her and I said, could you do this? And without a second of hesitation, she said, sure. She had zero military in her family too, so that began our journey. One of the things about the Marine Corps is it's a force of about 180,000 Marines. We purposely turn over about 40,000 Marines a year. So imagine in your company, you try to retain everybody. We're cycling through about 40,000 a year. And one of the reasons that is because we're a young force. We're the youngest force, right? We want those young men and women, 18 to 24 years old, to join. We are a lot of tooth and very little tail. The other services are, a lot of tail, a little bit of tooth. So, so we purposely do that. So in order to do that, what do you have to have? You have to have quality leadership, right? If you're turning that many people over. So how we kind of approached it is Marine Corps leadership. And really, what I want you to focus on here is mission accomplishment. That's it. When you're in a life and death business, there is no room for failure. You can't fail. And so we build in Marines that attitude that all else you will accomplish your mission. So when we start boot camp and we start officer candidate school, a little bit how we do it, we transform a civilian into a recruit or officer candidate, and we transform a recruit and officer candidate into a Marine. And one of the first things you're taught in both of those processes is leadership. And I'm going to show you later on some of those things, but it's primary in everything that you do. From the time that you first start at boot camp or OCS until you either leave the service voluntarily or you retire. Another thing is, we try to make better citizens. So one of the things that attracted me to the Great Game when I was looking for a job after I retired in 2017 is a culture. I wanted a culture because I had been in a culture for 30 years. We bring all these Marine recruits in. They have different attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. They come from all walks of life. And they all join the Marine Corps for a different reason. They're running away from something. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. Whatever it is, they all come. And then we, in 12 weeks, put in them the culture, how you act as a Marine, what we expect of you as a Marine. And that becomes their life, and for some of us, for the rest of our lives. We always say, once a Marine, always a Marine. So, we create that culture. That's what attracted me to SRC in the Great Game, is the culture of even the person doing the sweeping of the floor can change his life and other people's life, through the Great Game. And that's what we kind of believed in the Marine Corps. Leadership philosophy, it's up or out. You can't stay a corporal for your entire 20-year career. You have to compete. Every day is a competition. It's funny, we have minimum scores for certain events. If you do the minimum, you're not going to make it. And if the score is, if 18 minutes is the time, the max run time for the 3-mile run, you better hit 18 minutes. That's how you compete. So it's up or out. It's always a competition. If you're in the Marine Corps, you will lead at some point in your career. You're going to lead. You're going to be a leader. There's no choice. You can't raise your hand and say, I want to be a leader, or I don't want to be a leader. If you're going to stay a Marine, you have to lead. So we do PME, professional military education at every grade. You can't get promoted unless you complete this education. So it's a leadership academy. 2 Marines together, one's always in charge. So, if you're out and a Marine gets in a bar fight, gets arrested, he's with his buddy. So the next morning when he has to come stand in front of my desk, guess who else I have in there right after him? His buddy. Why didn't you prevent him from doing that? This is your responsibility. This is one of my favorites. A leader can delegate authority, but never responsibility. You are responsible for all that your unit does or fails to do. I'll give you a quick story. When I started working at SRC, we have huddles every week, and I noticed this one employee kept walking in late to the huddle every week, 3 weeks in a row. And he was carrying a bag of chips and a soda, so I knew why he was late. He ran down the soda machine, got a snack. And so I brought the team leader over, and I'm like, hey, so-and-so's been late for 3 weeks in a row. I've noticed this. The next time he's late, I'm writing you up. And he looked at me like, what are you talking about? Why are you writing me up? I'm not the one that's late. I'm like, yeah, you're the team leader. You're responsible for everything that he does or fails to do. That's on you. And so that was some of the struggles I had when I first got to SRC, is great company, great leaders, but they never focused on leadership. They focused on getting product out the door, being efficient, having good quality, but they didn't focus on the leadership aspect of it. I'll get into that here in a minute. Leadership is emphasized in every aspect of Marine Corps life. If I cut my grass one way and not the other way, somebody noticed. Especially as I got more senior, if my wife and I were out eating dinner and I had 5 drinks at dinner and got behind the wheel of the car, 10 people would notice. We were always on. You were always a leader all the time, and it was just emphasized. So let's talk about leader versus manager. I talked a little bit about when I got to SRC, a great company. I was attracted to SRC. I've loved working there the 5.5 years I've been there. When I got there, I noticed we did a lot of management. We didn't do a lot of leading. And that was nobody's fault. They were doing the best they could to get product out the door. But what I noticed right away is like, I've got to teach people how to lead. And there's a difference between being a manager. A manager follows processes. You can be a manager and you can be successful. You can hit your monthly goals. You can get product out the door. You can be efficient. You can have quality. You can hit your sales goals. But you're doing it because of your position. Like, I am the manager, so they must follow what I say. A leader inspires people. A leader gathers their power through influence, through engagement. And that's what we all should aspire to be. Leaders, here's another thing. So what I did was when one of my guys get in trouble, or one of my guys, our department doesn't hit a mission. Most people, managers, will go, well, they didn't follow the process. Well, they don't care. Well, their attitude's bad. Well, we don't have enough people. A leader looks inwardly and says, did I train them properly? Did I give them the resources they need? And most importantly, did I supervise them? Okay? That's, to me, is a simple difference between a leader and a manager. The leader always holds himself accountable first. So let's talk real quick about coaching, counseling, mentoring. Coaching, that's what you do every day. By walking through the factory, the office, or whatever, if you're a leader, that's part of coaching. It's called modeling. People watch leaders. They see what you do. They want to behave like you do. Counseling, very difficult to do. Counseling can have, people hear counseling, they think negative connotations because counseling means you did something bad. Absolutely not. Counseling session is when you sit down once a quarter, once a month, whatever. It's a prearranged time between you and one of your subordinates, and you go through those sustains, improves, goals, the career development, and those things. It's very difficult to do. When I started doing counseling at SRC, my team leaders fought me tooth or nail. They did not want to do it. It was scary. And I'll tell you, the first time that I did it as a 22-year-old lieutenant, second lieutenant, been in the Marine Corps a grand total of a year, and 11 of those months was in school, learning how to be a leader. And I stepped in front of my platoon, 20 Marines, 5 tanks, 1988. These are about half the platoon of Beirut veterans. These guys have been in combat. And I've got to sit down as a snot-nosed 22-year-old and tell a gunnery sergeant who'd been in the Marine Corps 15 years, fought in Beirut, what he needs to sustain, improve, and what goals he wants to set for himself. I'm telling you, it scared me to death. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. But as you do it and you continue to do it and you get better, it makes you develops you as a better leader, and it develops your subordinates as a better leader. And that's how you create these succession plans through this program. So when you're talking about leadership succession planning, it's through this. Mentoring, we all have mentors or somebody you can pick up the phone and call. Hey, this is happening. I don't know how to handle this. It's somebody that's probably been in a position like yours before that know how to handle it. So the first thing I did when I got to SRC is I said, okay, I've got to teach my guys what makes a good leader. And these 14 traits, it's an acronym called JJ Did Tie Buckle. We spent a good part of a year learning these traits. And why did we do that? Because we wanted to develop a language. I wanted to be able, when I saw something happen on the floor, I could go to this person and say, hey, what happened here? What do you think you did wrong? Well, Jeff, my bearing was off. And he and I both know exactly what that means. And we can talk through that. So when I do my counselings, this is how I grade my subordinate leaders. I grade them through these leadership traits. If you could bring them back up, please. So we changed our annual reviews. So my annual reviews for all of my subordinate leaders now, that's what's on it. That's it. And there's one cultural piece. But it's this, and this is how I grade them. And this is, if we do all of these things well, if you are the best you can be in these traits, then all the other things will fall into place. Now we'll talk about those other things, and that's where our sustains and improves are. But those leadership traits, like I said, that's our language. That's how we live. That's how we lead. The next thing we have leadership principles. This is how you act. These are those things as a leader that when you go out and do your day-to-day thing, this is how you act. And if you do these things, and you do them every day, and you pay attention to it, and you grade yourself and you grade others, you'll be successful. Now, this was hard to teach. It's learned, it's taught. You mess it up way more times than you get it right until you get comfortable in it. But we transformed our team going through this process and then teaching them counseling, teaching them how to coach, encouraging them to get mentors, all those other things, the numbers at the end of the month, the efficiency, the quality fell into place. So I encourage any of you, if you want to look at a way to teach leadership to your folks, to live leadership, you can Google it online. You can pull up the same thing that I just showed you. I can send you the slides. But it's a great way to do it. I've been going to a couple other companies in SRC and helping them out with teaching this. We've got a breakout session right after this at 9:30, where one of those companies that I introduced this to outside of mine, we're going to sit down and talk about how we executed this and how we did it. So anyway, I've probably got time for one or two questions if anybody has any. But if not, we'll be in the breakout session afterwards, I think right down the hall here, and you can come talk to us. I want to thank you very much for having me here. 15 minutes is a short amount of time for me to talk. I could talk about this for the rest of the day. But I really enjoyed being here. And, everybody wants to be led. Everybody wants to be led by a good leader. I do. 58 years old. I've been in my professional life for 36 years, and I still want my boss to be the best leader he can be.
There's a number of things that stood out, and I'm going to ask for your feedback to see what things stood out for you. He talked about a lot of different qualities of leadership, traits of leaderships, actions that people take. So what kind of things did you take away that you kind of had an aha moment of what you'd like to implement in your leadership role? Because as we started, everybody in the room's a leader, right? So what things do you want to do as a leader? How do you want to inspire others? Even if you're only inspiring a coworker, and I don't mean only as only, I mean, you're inspiring, your spouse, your children, your coworkers. How do you go about inspiring?
Leading by example.
Leading by example. And I think he referred to that as well, that people are looking to see what you're doing. Yeah, very good. Yes.
I think there's something to be said whenever he said meet with them quarterly and find out what they're trying to sustain, their goals and their improvements, or that they think that they can take away, because then that also makes them feel heard.
Yes, it does. Meeting with them quarterly, communicating, and that's a two-way communication, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. That two-way communication. Excellent. What else you guys got?
I liked the part when he was talking about the gentleman who was always late for Huddle and holding that manager accountable for making that person be on time for Huddle. It's your responsibility to help that person grow.
Mhm.
And he held the fire to the manager's foot to ensure, okay, well, a lot of people would say, oh, well, he's late, that's his problem. No, it's everyone's problem. Like, you need to help that person grow.
Yeah.
Show them why it's important to be on time and why it's important to, be a better employee.
Yeah, and how many of us would have thought to take that approach of holding the supervisor or manager accountable for the employee being tardy to Huddle? Normally you would kind of say, well, you need to go directly to that person, but holding the manager account to that. Interesting take, isn't it? And actually not a bad one, because we all need to take responsibility. So that was a really good point. What other takeaways do we have? Yes, Justin.
I think it was a good reminder that people want to have good leadership. A lot of times when there's issues, whether that's in our organization or in our families or in our church or whatever, and there's some sort of a disconnect, we oftentimes are too quick to want to dismiss and say, well, it's just that person's fault. It's the follower's fault. They're cynical. Nothing will ever be good enough for them. They'll always, find something wrong with everything. And so sometimes we're a little too quick to dismiss that and not say, there could be solutions here. There could be places where this leader could improve, because ultimately people do want to follow a good leader, even if they make it difficult for themselves sometimes. They do, in the end, follow the leadership.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, and people want to follow leaders. People are looking to leaders, and the one thing that in continuation, Justin, of what you've identified is that the leader is ultimately responsible. If there's a failure on the team, it's the leader who's responsible. And so it's important that the leader identify, what could I have done better? How could I have changed that situation? And so he really articulated that, and that's a really good point. So what other comments do we have in the room?
I think it's important for any leader to be open, accountable to their people. By that, I mean, you should set a good example, and you shouldn't assume that they know what you're doing. For example, if you take off, then probably got a very good reason. They may not know that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're coming in 5 minutes late, you expect them to be on time. They certainly notice that. And if you are, maybe you read a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine, but they don't know that unless you tell them. So very important to be, I think, a good example. Part of that is communicating with them, letting them know that, hey, I'm following the same standards that I have for you, that I expect you to do that, at least that.
Yeah, so it's basically leadership by example and being accountable as a leader. And that's exactly setting that example. And in addition, like you talk about, that communication piece. If you're late because you're at an early morning meeting, or you're leaving in the early afternoon to head to a meeting, that communication piece, you're not just ducking out. There's a purpose to it. So communication is really critical. And I think, perhaps people look at leadership, and they look at that someone that's talking at you or talking to you, and that is the worst form of leadership, because leadership is communication. It is always communication both ways, without question. And so I think he really stressed that point. Although initially it was hard for me to have a mental or physical image of military, because it is so stringent. And if you're going through boot camp or something, you don't have choices. There's no communicating back to those folks. And so it was an interesting perspective how he developed all this from the military setting, and then transferred that to SRC and the private business. So I thought that was interesting. I was going to see if there was a couple other points that kind of stood out to me. Do we have a couple minutes? Yeah, we have a couple minutes. So what did you think about the analogy between a manager and a leader? How did that analogy hit home?
I mean, some people are more natural at being a leader.
Mhm.
Your
trust and, it's not, you're not just like gonna step into a role, like if you get promoted from one position into leadership or management position, you kind of have to earn that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so leadership is an earned quality. Okay. What did anyone else get out of that distinction between a manager and a leader?
Strictly be a title, you know, and it's the action that creates the other. It's the investment. Because management literally is a title. It gives you a position, but you move towards leadership. You take an action towards that.
Okay, so management can be a title where leadership actually drives action. Yeah. Yes,
Well, I think leadership is hard. And
leadership is hard.
that sometimes we listen to speakers like this guy or read books like Who Moved My Cheese and
Mhm.
you know these little trophy books that
Mhm.
you know I often wonder. I would love to talk to the people that these folks manage and see if they're as great as they come on. But I think it's an evolving process.
Mhm.
I think that folks who you lead don't appreciate how hard it can be sometimes. And I often thought, I think it was Scott Miller who used to run City Utilities. He was the executive director over there. He always told me, he said, what you need to do is that your executive team have an empty chair. He just calls it the empty chair, where you bring in somebody that you manage every week so that they can sort of appreciate how hard leadership is. Because I don't know that always gets communicated down from the leaders to the folks that are being led or managed or whatever. I just think it's incredibly hard. Gotcha.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Leadership is hard. It's challenging. Nothing in life worthwhile is easy. We've all found that out. But yeah, there is more to it than what might be on the surface and what you might see. So you might kind of take that in mind when you're working with your team, and because it's always still a team effort. We're probably going to bring various topics that we had at the gathering. Pre-COVID, we would go to the gathering and then we would bring those topics back and we would take sessions. They wouldn't be necessarily recorded presentations like this, but it would be more of a PowerPoint with discussion and interaction like we've done here this morning. So we're going to be bringing more topics to you for the three of us that went, and we've got more content. We're looking to boost your huddles. As a matter of fact, there was a survey that went out. Does it close today, the survey, or?
There's gonna be an email reminder today.
Okay, so the survey closes today, and what we're wanting to is to get feedback from you all, what you want to see in huddles, what you like in huddles, what content's good to you. So as we plan the upcoming year, what does that look like? So these are your huddles, and that feedback's going to be very valuable. So I appreciate your time today, and we'll see you next week.